Jacob is the one true Batman fan that has ever existed and will ever exist. So once Jacob dies, there will be no pure, untainted Batman fans left in society.
It's true.
That's just, I mean, so what you guys need to understand is this is a national treasure that I am speaking right now. And please keep that in mind in the comment section. Please pay deference to this person because he really is one of the more important people that you will see on this podcast. Certainly more important than pretty much anybody that you'll see on my podcast or any other podcast, really. So thank you, Jacob, for coming on the show. So today we're going to be talking about the top 5 shock moments in TV and movies, because as people might have seen on Twitter recently, I was talking about the top 10 death scenes, and I'm sure that I will end up doing an episode on that. But I was also thinking, there's sometimes sometimes it comes in the form of a death scene, but there's one of the things that is really hard to do, especially nowadays with social media, is have a really shocking moment in media, right. Whether it's movies or TV or books. It's hard to surprise people now because people expect, oh, there's gonna be something, there's got to be more to this than just that. I mean, and then when it comes to movies, especially with leaks and everything, it's just so hard. Like the entire plot of The Rise of Skywalker, for example, was already out on social media weeks before the movie released. So it's like you can't surprise people anymore.
Right.
And so that's why I wanted to devote kind of an episode talking about things that have been successful in the history of media when it comes to like a major plot twist. So I want to start with basically what we're going to do is kind of like the episodes you guys have watched with Donovan Fowler when we do a top 10. Each of us is going to present 5 moments in TV or media. We're going to start from the least surprising to the most surprising, and these are all subjective, you guys. So just chill out. It's not supposed to be like if you don't agree with me, then you could just take a hike. You know what? just calm down. So basically, I'm gonna have Jacob start. What would be of the top 5? What would be the least surprising of your top 5 plot twists?
Well, I'm a huge Blue Bloods fan. I talk about Blue Bloods on Studio Jake all the time. Probably in that show, it's on CBS. I think as far as just regular networks, it's probably the best show on television right now. The least surprising is, for those of you unfamiliar with it, it's this family. All the sons are police officers. The grandfather, he was a former police commissioner of New York. The dad is a current police commissioner, and then the sister is a Brooklyn DA, a assistant district attorney. One thing that has been, they've been kind of building through the series, but I felt like this past season in 2019 they really fleshed out, is the sister, whose name is Airey. She's kind of turning into the villain of the show, and it's been really interesting because the show has this dynamic where each character is sort of a different political person. So Frank Reagan, who's the main character played by Tom Selleck, he's kind of an old school, almost John McCain-like conservative. You've got Danny Reagan, who's the police detective. He is probably the most conservative as far as law and order. You've got Jamie Reagan, who was originally like more of a liberal person, but has kind of become a moderate over the series progressed. And now you've got Erin Reagan, who she has been the liberal through the whole show. But because she's become more liberal, because she actually in the show she got promoted, she's become more of the villain. She just has naturally, and you find yourself, and they're not trying to do this on purpose. You can tell they're really trying to make a case that, oh, she's actually in the right compared to all her lughead police family. But she's actually turning into more of the villain. because to me, it always comes out that she was wrong. She always makes like these stands, and you're just like, and you tell they want the audience to go slay queen, but you end up going, well, I actually agree with Frank on this. I think she's wrong.
Yeah.
And so, but to me, I felt like this past season, they've been doing that for the last like 2 or 3 seasons. But this 2019 season, and they just had their mid-season finale, I really felt like they brought it more up. And it's not like an obvious villain where she's like a Cruella de Vil. It's clearly she's just become antagonistic compared to the rest of the family.
So my number 5 on this would be the Wizard of Oz being found out as a fraud, basically. I think it, by that I mean, obviously it's a children's book and it's been around for almost 100 years, I think, at this point. But I think that plot twist is one of the most classic kind of plot twists you can have, where it's kind of...
Are you talking about the book or the movie, just to clarify?
Really both of them, because
okay.
It's kind of a sleight of hand. It's like, or maybe not a sleight of hand, but nothing in that section of the story is as it seems. So it's kind of like how I just, maybe I'm just going too deep with it, but it's almost like a little bit of commentary on how people that are big and powerful and famous, or whatever it happens to be, your perception of them is usually not what the reality is. And so I feel like that is what the Wizard of Oz kind of represents, is he is just a representation of a fraud. And so any fraud that you know, or any powerful person like Harvey Weinstein, for example, he's viewed on one side as being powerful and above it all, and he can get whatever he wants, but in real life he's just a small tiny man now that he's being brought off to prison. And so it's just that's kind of what I get from the Wizard of Oz, is that the story of the actual wizard is about somebody who is a fraud who gets found out. And I think that is not necessarily a surprise, but I just think it's like a classic retelling of a fraud being found out, basically. So that's my little, a little bit deeper than I meant to go with explanation of why I chose the Wizard of Oz as one of my favorite plot twist moments.
All right. See, do you want me to go to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. So probably number 4, going a little bit more retro, is, and this actually might be on your list, is actually in The Wrath of Khan, where I know this sounds so silly, but when they find out that Khan is alive, I know this movie is called Wrath of Khan and he's in all the trailers, but that scene, it's just so well acted by, what's the actor's name? The guy who plays Khan.
Oh, Ricardo Montalban.
Yes. He the way he, of course you would know this.
Yeah, I would.
Him and the guy who played Chekhov, the original Chekhov, they do that scene so well and so powerful that even though Khan is alive,
right,
just still the fact that Chekhov realizes it blows your mind. It's probably, as far as, I remember watching it when I was a teenager, and it really, like I said, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. And then later I watched it as an adult, and the scene still holds up because, like I said, it's so well acted. When Chekhov just goes, Khan. Of course, I'm a terrible actor compared to him, but your surprise matches Chekhov's.
That is a great reveal scene. It's actually not on my list. I didn't even think of that, but because Ricardo Montalban does very delicately and carefully take off his mask, and it's a great reveal scene. So I think that's a great point. Yeah,
and so that would be my number. That would be my number 4. As far as, and again, like Kelly said, this is completely a subjective list. This isn't a definitive list. But I mean, as far as me watching a movie and watching a classic one, because I get into arguments with some older Trekker fans all the time. They think that only Star Trek and Star Trek the Animated Series exists. But even me being a newer one who came in on Next Generation and Voyager,
Mhm.
I still, that scene like really holds up for me, even though, it's still got the 80s cheese ball stuff in it, but
Right.
it's still a fantastically, that scene in particular, that's the best Star Trek movie, hands down. Even I admit that.
Yeah.
And hands down, that's one of the best shot scenes and reveals. Like I said, even though it's coming,
Yeah.
the fact that it still weighs on you just goes to how well directed it was.
And I think that's important in movies to have when you have a scene that you know is coming to make it good because again you know it's coming and so you've already taken you're not going to surprise anybody but I think that's a really great example of some of people who took a scene that was going to be obvious and really amping it up to the next level and I wish that people would just like be able to do this in their movies nowadays. It's so
Yeah.
sad. I just having come out of the Rise of Skywalker, and I know you were a little bit less disappointed with the Rise of Skywalker than I was, but there's just so many ways that you could have done things better, and I just look at these other classic movies and I think, see, they knew what they were doing. They knew how to make a good movie. So my fourth one, and this covers movies and books, is when Katniss and Peeta decide to commit suicide at the end of the first Hunger Games. Oh yeah, sorry, spoiler alert, but that happened. If you haven't seen the Hunger Games by now, the movie came out in 2012 and the books came out prior to that. So I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you guys. But I thought that was a great plot twist because it really drove home how desperate those kids were and to what extent their desperation would drive them to. And
Mhm.
I guess I was thinking about this and I thought, isn't it kind of weird that, you put kids in these just destitute situations, and they're having to kill each other and all of this. And of course, you're going to have the kids that are just going to give in to the animal and just start killing people. But it's just surprising that I'm not saying this is a plot hole in the story, but that the fact that it took 64 years for somebody to decide I'm not going to do this and to take that option out. Maybe Katniss as a character was just more depressed than a lot of the other ones because she was from District 12. But I don't know. It just it does it fits right in with the you put people in this desperate situation where they're having to kill other young people like themselves and why it makes logical sense, but you don't necessarily think that they're going to go there. Are they really going to go there? Anyway,
It's kind of funny that you mentioned the Hunger Games because I always this, us working literally right next to each other for a number of years,
mhm,
is I always complain about wannabes and posers.
yeah,
And so it's the people who they saw the Dark Knight trilogy or they played the Arkham games and they think they know everything there is to know about Batman.
mhm,
And but what's funny is I found myself on the side of that when I saw Hunger Games,
mhm,
because I hadn't read the books up
yeah,
until I saw the first one, and I thought, oh my gosh, what did I miss?
yeah.
And so I went back and reread the whole trilogy. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of funny because the Hunger Games was found myself in that wannabe poser condition because like
Yeah.
I was debating Peeta's relationship with Katniss to someone in my church, and they said, "Have you even read the books?" And I was like, "No." And they were like, "Yeah," and they were like, "Okay, well, so," because I was saying, if you saw the first one, you're kind of like, "Oh, Gale, who has a girly name but definitely is a manly man."
Yep.
He that whole relationship, I was like, Katniss should be with Gale. It just makes more sense. And
Mhm.
they were like, you haven't read the books, you don't know what you're talking about. And so I thought that was kind of funny that and then when I read the books, I was like, oh my gosh, everyone is right but me. So it was kind of fun finding myself on that side of the fence there.
That's fun to kind of, oh, Jacob got put in his place for the first time. But in your defense, I will say my best friend read all the books, watched all the movies, and still says to this day that Katniss should have been with Gale. So
Well, spoiler alert, but in the last one, doesn't he like murder Katniss's sister? Like
he does, but he does.
unintentionally.
he doesn't do it on purpose. He's the one who orchestrates the attack, and Katniss's sister happens to be there when the attack happens. Mm-hmm. But so I did think it was a little bit unjustified for her to blame him quite so much, because he didn't purposely say, okay, I'm going to attack now because I know Katniss's sister is there. Like, Gale would not have done that purposefully. But their conversation prior to that is she thought that kind of attack was unethical, and that's right. Why she told him that he shouldn't use that kind of weaponry to fight the other side or whatever, and then he went and did it anyway. And whether you agree with Gale or not, Katniss is just not going to go with the guy who defied what she told him, and then her sister was a casualty as a result. So I understand. I was a Katniss and Peeta shipper for sure, but I'm just super excited for this next movie that's coming out. I'm so stoked because the villain of the original Hunger Games was supposed to be George W. Bush, but with a different name. And so now I just know they're going to make the villain Trump, and I'm going to laugh so hard because it's just going to be so desperate, and it's going to be wonderful. And anyway, we could talk about Hunger Games forever, but what would be your number 3? I think we're on.
I'm going to have to go with an anime, and I got special permission to mention an anime because I know Kelly does not partake of that particular fandom. But I've got to go with Ghost in the Shell, mm-hmm. the original anime, which I think the live action one gets way too much hate than it deserves, but we can talk about that. That's a whole other thing. But the anime is a lot different because we have all these movies like I Am Mother, or AI, or what's the one that Ex Machina, which is, does a robot have a soul? Which I personally believe mechanical things can't get a soul. That's just my opinion. But Ghost in the Shell asks a different question. It's, when I become this cyborg and get cyberized, do I still have my soul? Mm-hmm. And I thought that, and to me, that's a way, way better question to ask. And the main character, who is referred to in the show as the Major, one of the, as far as the big reveal of it is, the Major there's this artificial intelligence that develops on its own, like evolves, and so it becomes like this big question: does this thing have a soul? But then also, like I said, the second question is, does the Major still have a soul because she's completely cyberized? Mm-hmm. And ultimately. Now, this is a spoiler alert because this happens at the end. The Major decides to find out on her own and downloads her brain into the web, into the internet, because she wants to explore the internet and just find out, do I still have a soul? The premise of it is she's kind of losing touch with her humanity because she's become this powerful cyborg. In the live action, when they change the ending, she decides not to. And to stay, because they wanted to do a sequel, obviously. Mm-hmm. So so that was kind of like, for me, that was a big surprise because I was expecting her to stay, because there are sequels, but I found out later the sequels are an alternate timeline. They're not part of the first. There's two movies. They're not part of those first two anime timelines. It's like an alternate reality, basically. And animes do that all the time. That's a common plot device. But for me, I was expecting her to stay because they were kind of hinting at a romance between her and her partner, and then she plugs herself in, and so I thought that was kind of a significant moment, and they're trying to spin it as she's freeing herself, which I felt more was. I could be getting it wrong because again, I'm an American person trying to decipher this Japanese amazing piece of artwork, but. I thought it was more about she was trying to find her freedom. And so, because that's another thing that they talk about constantly is, are we really free as in our current states as cyborgs and whatnot? So anyway, Ghost in the Shell is credited as making cyberpunk popular. That one and Akira, which I won't go into Akira because, man, you could do like 3 episodes on the themes in Akira. But yeah, but that was a big twist for me. Was like I said, I was expecting her to stay in her human body or her cyborg body, but then she's like, no, I'm going to plug in and I'm going to explore what it's like in the cyber world or whatever. And so it was a very meaningful ending. And even though I didn't really care for it, I wanted her to stay alive. I still thought it was very meaning that she was going to try to find herself this way. Normally, I don't like those kinds of stories. I'm like, find yourself, hippy dippy love. But it was really more about she felt bound, and so she was actually going to find her freedom. So there you go.
I think that people need to be careful with using some, like, if you're going to do, like, I don't know, a stereotype or a story that's been overused, you've got to find some way to make it interesting in its own way. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, is they were able to take something that is either cliche or overused, and they made it in a way that you were able to enjoy it and relate to it, instead of just being like, oh my gosh, it's this again, this thing.
Right.
Or, that whole thing about finding yourself, it does get old. It's kind of like, I can't remember if this is a point of disagreement between the two of us, but I don't like coming of age stories, because I feel like that is an overused plot line, or, I just get tired of it. So every Spider-Man movie is always, it's a coming of age story. And I'm just like, okay, let's move on. We've heard this now 3 times.
Well, it's not a point of disagreement. I do think it's overused, but I like coming of age stories where the person is better at the end. So like Karate Kid, the person is better at the end. So I like that one. Spider-Man Homecoming, just to disagree with you there. Yes, it is a coming of age story, but I think he was better at the end. Mm-hmm. So so that one I do like. So just to put it in perspective. But yeah, I actually agree with you. I do think the genre is overused. Like, I actually think Catcher in the Rye is probably one of the most famous coming of age stories. It's kind of a dumb story, because in my opinion, he is worse at the end. They kind of make it where he's mature, but I'm like, he matured in a bad way, not a good way. So anyway, that's my take on it.
I guess an example of it's kind of a coming of age story, but an example of one that I did maybe like is too strong, because I think the movie is overrated, but Saturday Night Fever is technically a coming of age story, because it's about a 19-year-old guy who's a partier and a drinker and all the rest of it, and he lives this very haphazard and irresponsible lifestyle, and at the end of the movie he decides to leave his neighborhood, like leave the entire area and go away and try to make a better life for himself, not doing these things. And so I guess that's an example of one that I like. And to your point, he theoretically, we don't actually see him change. We just see him make the decision to change. But theoretically, he's at least come to the understanding that this lifestyle he's been living is just not, something that's going to be fulfilling long term. And so I guess that's an example of a movie that I like for the dancing in the movie, but the morals that are portrayed in the movie are pretty poor. And so, but I do like that at the end the guy says, you know what, it's time to put this irresponsible part of my life behind me. So I guess to a certain extent, I agree with you on that point. I get tired of perhaps the stereotypical like high school coming of age story. Right. It seems like every other movie is about, oh, I'm in high school and I have a crush on this girl, and oh my gosh, just no, just we're done. So my number 3, and you're definitely gonna like this one. The Shield is Hydra reveal in Captain America: Winter Soldier was one of the best moments I've ever seen in cinematic history. And then this is kind of a dual thing, because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. also was connected to that movie, and so then the reveal that Ward is Hydra. Yes, I just spoiled it for you, but nobody watches Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. anyway, so it's fine. But those two coupled together as my third one, I thought that was, I was just, there's very few movies that I've seen 3 times in the theater, and that was one of them. And then also, I was not bored in that movie. I was at the edge of my seat, like, oh my gosh, and then this happened, and then so-and-so is dead, and then no, but this person is not dead. And that was an amazing plot twist. And it happened very early on in the movie, too. And it just completely upended everything you thought about the Marvel Cinematic Universe prior to that. So that was a really big deal for me. in the theater and watching it on TV, because for them to find out that one of their closest friends is actually with the enemy and he's killing people brutally in the closet, and then to find the arm hanging, and it's all the good stuff. So I had a feeling that you would agree with me on that one.
Oh yeah, 100%. It is probably my third favorite Marvel film after the original Avengers and the first Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely. And whenever people talk about the MCU, they always want to bring up Thor: Dark World or the Incredible Hulk. And I'm like, okay, why don't you bring up Captain America: Winter Soldier? Because even people who don't like comic book films have to admit that that's a good movie.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That was my most favorite Marvel movie until Infinity War came out. And then Infinity War is also really, really good. And so it's been very difficult for me to reconcile which one was better.
Mm-hmm.
Infinity War, I don't think was as shocking to me, but I thought it had some really fantastic dramatic scenes. And they really did take it to the next level by wiping out half of everything. And
yeah, I remember I had this conversation with people. They were like, "Oh, but we know Spider-Man's coming back." I'm like,
yeah.
And then I said, "Do you go see Mission Impossible movies?" Yes. Do you really think Ethan Hunt is not coming back? Well, no. Okay, then shut up. So.
I mean, I didn't cry over the Spider-Man thing. I think that it might have been, that scene might have been handled a little bit more tactfully or with a little bit more respect for the audience in that way. But I don't think it's like, I mean, I didn't think it damaged the movie. Like,
I didn't either. And also, I don't think people realized it wasn't about, did you know that they weren't going to come back? It was, to me, it was more about removing these players.
mm.
So it's way harder for the heroes to do something in the next one. That's what I thought. That's what I thought was going on.
And I now, having watched Endgame, I can see that scene was meant to show Tony having a devastating loss.
Right.
That scene wasn't so much about Spider-Man as it was about Tony. And so I guess I can appreciate it a little bit more if you look at it in that light. Yeah, we're kind of getting off track here a little bit. Marvel is such a rabbit hole, So I think we're now on your second to the last pick.
All right, so my second to last pick is the first Alien film, which was directed by Ridley Scott, and it's when you realize the alien is still alive, the xenomorph is still alive. Because there's some scenes where Ripley, who's played by Sigourney Weaver, which whenever SJWs say boys or men don't like female superheroes, I'm like, Alien? Like, we went to all four of the movies with Ripley. But anyway, so Sigourney Weaver thinks that she finally killed the xenomorph. She goes and lays down. She actually is going to go to sleep. And then she hears a tap, 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 and it's it's still alive moment. And it's probably because Ridley Scott actually filmed it as a horror film, not as a sci-fi film. It's as a horror film. So it's a little bit gory. And James Cameron, when he filmed the second one, he made it more of an action film. So it's less gory. And what I mean gory, I'm not saying it's like where there's like, you see people's intestines and whatnot. There's only like one super gory scene, and after that it's just kind of generic, typical Hollywood blood slasher stuff. But that scene, like, it makes your skin crawl. Like I said, this is completely my take. I didn't see Alien until I was an adult. My parents didn't let me watch any of those movies, so I actually didn't see it till I was in college. And it still like scared me, like, because I had no context for it. It's not like The Shining where about the "Here's Johnny" scene. People don't really talk about that scene as far as Alien. So like when you realize that it's still alive, you're like, oh my gosh, she's been through all this trial and tribulation and losing her crew, and she thinks she killed this thing and it's still alive. And now angry and wants to eat her even more than it did before. So yeah, definitely that I'm gonna have to go. That's number 2.
So my number 2 is not. It's not a surprise so much in the movie, but it's supposed to be in the book. So it's when Éowyn reveals herself as being Durnhelm in the Lord of the Rings, in the Return of the King, and kills the Witch King. A lot of people have seen the Lord of the Rings movies, but they haven't read the books. And if you read the books, you'll understand that the audience wasn't supposed to know that Éowyn was the one riding with Merry to war until that point. The entire time her name is Durnhelm, and she like pretends to be a man basically, and like lowers her voice and is saying to Merry, you want to ride with me, and she never takes her helmet off. And that should be a first clue that there's something going on when somebody doesn't want to take their helmet off. It's a total Batman move, but that I think is one of the most fantastic reveals. Even in the movie, because in the movie it's Éowyn because they didn't want to go through the whole rigmarole of this is Sternhelm or whatever. It's a fantastic reveal, like, because everybody has been throwing her under the bus basically. You're not worth anything. You stay home. You wash the dishes. And for all, I get really sick of all the people who after the Hobbit films were calling J.R.R. Tolkien a sexist because there were no female characters, and Peter Jackson felt the need to insert more female characters into the Hobbit to make up for J.R.R. Tolkien's sexism. And I'm like, you're talking about the guy who wrote the stereotypical story about the woman who by the men was told to stay at home, take care of the kids, and wash the dishes, and who went out to battle and killed one of the hardest people to kill that literally no man in the book was said to be able to kill this person, and she went out and did it. And he's the sexist. Right. This guy is the guy who hates women. So that's why I love that scene. I love it in the book. I love it in the movie. I like to look at them as two interpretations of the same story. But that would be my number 2. So what I want to do with you before we go to our number 1s is talk about if we have any honorable mentions, because I find it hard when we're doing these lists to like narrow things down, and I feel like there was that, and then there was this, and then there was what, and so I wanted to see if you had any others that didn't quite make the top 5 cut that you wanted to throw in there.
Honorable mention's got to be the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. It's a Western starring John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart, and Martin Lee, I believe, plays the villain. And basically what happens is Liberty Valance is this villain who's been terrorizing this area of the West. They don't really say where it is, but it's implied that it's Tennessee, basically. And so, spoiler alert: whatever his name is, his character kills Liberty Valance, or so he thinks, and you actually find out that John Wayne's character killed him. Jimmy Stewart, his character fires a gun, but he misses, but John Wayne shoots him at the same time. And that, whenever I first saw it as a millennial, because it's done so subtly, and whenever you find out what really happened, you almost feel bad for John Wayne's character. So that because Jimmy Stewart's character is the one who got all the accolades and all the fame from this, and he's credited with freeing the West for getting rid of this terrible, being brave enough to shoot down this hardened outlaw and all that. So that's one honorable mention. But I'll toss it back to you. I'll toss it back to you because so you can go to your next one.
Okay. I think you'll like this one. My honorable one. I have 2 honorable mentions, and I'll bounce it back to you after I tell you my first one. But my first one was when Shira Hall is revealed to be a spy at the end of season 2 of Justice League, the cartoon. I love that. It's my favorite. It's a 3-part episode. The whole thing is phenomenal. I wish they would make a movie out of that, because
they did do a movie cut, and the movie cut is better.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. I meant like a live action movie. Like, right, yeah. I want to see that on the big screen with the right guy playing Batman and Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and it would just be amazing. because they're kind of the couple. Well, they're one of two couples, I should say. Shira Hall and Jon Stewart are one of them, and the ending where they separate and she goes away. Yeah, I just spoiled the whole thing. You guys don't watch my episodes if you're afraid of spoilers, but when she and Jon Stewart leave at the end of the episode, and she goes away and leaves the Justice League, technically forever, although she comes back in the later iteration of the show. It's just devastating. Like, even my dad was emotional after that episode. It was amazing. And so I just felt like, even though it's not necessarily top 5, it's one that I just thought was amazing. The fact that she was a spy, she betrayed all of her friends, and then later on she ends up betraying her other friends to go back with the Justice League and all the rest of it. So it's just it's a great I don't know if it's technically like thriller material. It's like a kind of dystopian almost. It's a dystopian story because the Earth is taken over and everybody's basically enslaved by Shayur's creatures or friends, whatever. The Thanagarians,
Yeah.
So what would be your other honorable mention?
Mine's also a TV one, and I know I've already lost apparently one subscriber for my hot take on this, but it's twofold. Star Trek Discovery. One is that season 2 is actually pretty good. Anson Mount does a great job as Captain Pike. For Star Trek fans, or for people who aren't Star Trek fans, Captain Pike was the captain of the Enterprise before James T. Kirk. And basically in this season, 7 signals are detected all throughout space. The Enterprise was originally supposed to go to them, but it got damaged. So Starfleet gives Captain Pike command of the Discovery to investigate. And spoiler alert, the twist ending, as you found out, the Discovery actually sent the signals from the future because to prevent.
It's a very Star Trekian kind of story.
Well, and that's what's interesting about Discovery is instead of doing standalone stories, it's very much like Enterprise, where it's like an overarching story through the whole season, especially season 2. And again, Anson Mount is phenomenal as Captain Pike. Pike was only played by 2 people in the original series, and he only appeared in 2 episodes. So it was the way they built
3 because one of them was a 2-parter.
Right. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yes, I stand corrected. But he was so it was risky getting a kind of legendary Star Trek character that everyone has like this idea of what he should be like, and I thought Anson Mount really nailed it. But the reveal that Discovery from the future was the one sending the signals because they were trying to stop an AI that had gone crazy that Starfleet had built to defeat the Klingons. That AI had figured out how to do time travel. And so the signals were for them to gather materials to be able to stop it. And that reveal was really surprising to me. I didn't see it coming. Normally with Star Trek, you can kind of figure it out. Even if it's good, you kind of know where it's going. But I had no idea that is what was going to happen. It was a complete shock to me.
So now Jacob, you're gonna make me have to watch Discovery now. This is not. I'm actually watching, just for a little backstory. I am actually watching Enterprise because Jacob said it was good. So here's the reason why I like it. And
it's not as good as the other shows, but it's good.
Yeah. I mean, it's campy, it's corny, and that's why I like it. But one of the reasons why I enjoy it is because they took more of the format from the original series, which is my all-time favorite version of Star Trek. They took kind of the captain, first officer, and doctor approach, although this time it's captain, science officer, and engineer. But they took like the triad or the trio dynamic and had, the engineer in Enterprise is very reminiscent on a personality level of DeForest Kelley's Dr. McCoy, and that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy it, because and then you've got obviously T'Pol as the Spock, and then you've got the captain who's kind of the one bringing the 3 together. And so that's why I like it, because they took the trio mentality and they they kept that. And I that's one of the things that made the original series so beloved, and it's one of the reasons why I'm watching Star Trek Enterprise. But that's completely a side point, but it's my show, so who cares? My second honorable mention, and this will be the last honorable mention, is when Flynn cuts Rapunzel's hair in Tangled. I know it's a Disney movie, you guys can cry. I don't care. It's one of my favorite Disney movies because of that, because it wasn't just the typical like there's a lot of Disney movies where it's just like, you expect the princess to be very shallow, and you expect there to be just this, silly little romance and not a lot of stakes at the end. And there were actually stakes at the end of that movie, and I was shocked because that's not the way the original story actually goes. And so I was just like completely and 100% shocked that happened. So it's mostly that scene I'm putting in there mostly just because I was like legitimately shocked that this happened, and I was like, what? This is a Disney movie and they're showing blood? What? How is this? And there's broken glass? This is a children's movie. What is happening here? The next thing they're going to use the word hell in it.
Well, the parents were still alive in that one, so you already knew it was off the rails.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I really love Tangled, and I'm going to have to do an entire episode on Disney movies after this, and on Star Trek Enterprise, but I've done so many Star Trek episodes of my show, people are just going to get tired of it. So, what is your number one most shocking moment in cinematic or TV history?
All right. This feels like I'm cheating, but it's the honest to God truth. Darth Vader revealed as Luke's father.
And that's mine as well. So
there you go. But it's so true, because when I saw the movie, first saw it when I was a kid because I had good parents. Mm-hmm. So whenever as a kid, whenever he actually says, "No, Luke, I'm your father," my jaw as a 9-year-old or however old I was, my jaw dropped. Yeah. I didn't see it coming. I didn't know it was coming, and it really surprised me. Mm-hmm. I just thought Darth Vader was this evil villain, and even me as a 9-year-old, I thought, wow, this story just pumped up. And when I know this sounds really silly to say, but when I was 9, that's actually when I first started writing stories. Mm-hmm. So, and no, I will not reveal the god awful stories I wrote when I was 9, but that's when I first started to write. And so even as a 9-year-old, I thought at the time, this is the greatest plot twist I ever. Of course, I had a different word in my head, but I thought this is the greatest plot twist I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and I did not see it coming. And to think, the British actor who was actually in the bodysuit, the Darth Vader bodysuit, not James Earl Jones, he is actually saying, "No, Obi-Wan killed your father." Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know that. He was actually saying, "Obi-Wan killed your father." Mm-hmm. And which, if you've seen the prequels, that makes a lot of sense. But when he says, "No, I am your father," that was one of the reasons Skywalker's reaction was, "That's not true. It's impossible." Was he was reacting to, "No, Obi-Wan killed your father." Because Mark Hamill didn't even know that was the case until after they shot the scene. So it's one of to me, it is a jaw-dropping moment in cinematic history. Like, you just go, what? Yeah. And there's actually videos on YouTube where you can watch for people reacting to that scene who have never seen the movie before, and they're hilarious.
It's amazing. Like, it goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the show, where they didn't have social media back then, so it was much easier for them to keep that secret. However, you still had to deal with leakers. You still had to deal with, nefarious people that wanted to wreck their movie or whatever. And so it's like you said, they told like 2 people, and then Mark Hamill at some point, like he was one of 3 people, I think, that knew prior to the release of the movie what the actual truth was. The guy playing Darth Vader didn't know. I mean, obviously James Earl Jones knew because he had to speak the lines, but there were so few people that actually knew the truth about that movie. And even like, as I saw it as a kid, but I actually knew, like, I watched A New Hope without knowing anything, and then I can't remember, somebody told me, oh yeah, Darth Vader is Luke's father and Leia is Luke's sister. And I was like, okay, thanks for wrecking all those movies for me.
Oh,
But
that's awful.
even without that though, it's still great to watch.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see the reaction, because that's what people really want to see, is the reaction when Luke finds out the truth, and Leah's reaction that she didn't vomit when she found out she made out with her brother. But yeah, I mean, it's a credit to George Lucas for, first of all, constructing a scene so well. I could talk about The Empire Strikes Back forever because it's such a good movie.
Yeah,
But
100%.
and also it's a credit to Lucasfilms for having been able to keep that secret and realizing, let's feed the public all this false information so that the truth can be revealed in the movie and people can actually enjoy the movie. And it is without a doubt the most shocking moment in all of cinematic history. And I don't care, you know what, Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams, you will never even come close. You don't even have a right to speak the words Star Wars, because you will never come anywhere near what that movie was.
It's also a credit to the director Irving Kershner, who here's a little bit of trivia that you might know because you're such a Star Wars fan like I am. Mm-hmm. Is Irving Kershner was not supposed to direct The Empire Strikes Back. Steven Spielberg was, but the Directors Guild had blacklisted George Lucas because he would refuse to put opening credits mm-hmm. at the beginning of his films. And so Lucas just said, okay, because Spielberg was a member of the guild, he said, I don't want you to get in trouble, so don't worry about it. Can you recommend someone? And so mm-hmm. Spielberg recommended Irving Kershner, who had only done B movies, and I'm talking bad B movies.
That's amazing.
But yeah. And so Lucas kind of took a chance on this guy. Yeah. And then he ended up directing one of I'm going to just say it, the best Star Wars movie, hands down. Yeah. And I know it's because Lucas probably had a lot of control in the room, mm-hmm. but it's still, I think Kershner is kind of an unsung hero. No mm-hmm. one talks about him. There was even a rumor that Lucas wanted him to come back and direct, because after the prequels, he was going to do a TV show called Star Wars Underworld, and he wanted him to come back and direct some of the first few episodes, mm-hmm. but he had passed away, mm-hmm. Which a lot of people think that his passing away had a lot to do with how this direction of Star Wars changed, because mm-hmm. he was supposed to be way more involved after. And I'm talking about after the prequels, obviously, mm-hmm. but anyway, I think that's a credit to him. One more story on this, but I actually asked my dad, because he saw it in the theaters. Mm-hmm. I said, what did you think when that reveal happened? And my dad said, I thought he was lying. Like, and I said, even when he kind of communicates to Luke, mm-hmm. and he goes, yeah, I thought it was a trick. Yeah. Because I did not believe that it was the truth until Obi-Wan's ghost told Luke that it was the truth.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And yeah, like he said, I thought it was just a trick to get Luke to turn to the dark side. And he said, I thought that was what was going to happen in Return of the Jedi.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing that your dad was so shocked by it that he refused to believe it.
Yeah.
Again, it just speaks to how good that scene was. I just can't, I cannot get over, watching these new Star Wars movies, and even if you enjoy them, you have to admit that they're not hitting the high bars that the previous, even the prequels. I'm sorry. Like,
yeah, it's true.
I am slowly becoming Jacob on the prequels, because the prequels are so much more enjoyable than the sequel trilogy. The sequel trilogy should just be burned. Yeah. But that's
fellow Daily Wire writer James Barrett and I had a confrontation at the Daily Wire recently, mm-hmm. where he was trying to make the case that The Last Jedi was actually a good film. And of course, me, I immediately went into Hulk mode, and he goes, and then I said, for all the faults of the prequels, they at least tell a good story. Mm-hmm. And he goes, you're not saying the prequels are better than the new trilogy? And I said, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And he actually got up and left. Like, It's like, bye,
You know what?
Barrett.
I'm going to be deleting his contact out of my phone now after this. Just kidding. I love him. But the prequels are better than the sequels by far. There's just no, I can't understand people that make the argument that The Last Jedi or that The Rise of Skywalker or even that The Force Awakens is even close to what the previous iterations of Star Wars were. It's just very disappointing to me to see this franchise end on such a poor note. But
yeah, and for me, it's I think I even mentioned this to you one time, was the battle between the prequels and the original trilogy was fun. So like you could spray it was like you would have the people who didn't like the prequels and the prequel fans. They would get together in a paintball fight. So you'd walk out covered in goo, maybe a little bruised, but you had a good time.
yeah.
But the way The Last Jedi in particular split the fan base, now we're in knife fights and we're all trying to cut each other. And and that it lies firmly at the feet of Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy. Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker, I like them a little bit more than you. I think they're mediocre, but I don't think that they're bad. But knowing that The Last Jedi exists, I'm with you on they should just reboot and pretend like that trilogy never happened.
Yeah. It's a real disappointment for me as a longtime Star Wars fan. And and when I was in middle school, I was a Star Wars junkie. It actually, there was a point where I was like, okay, I think I'm taking this too far. But me as 12 years old was saying this. So that can just tell you how much I loved Star Wars at the time. But yeah, so those are our top 5 shock moments in media. If you guys disagree, I don't care, but please comment anyway, and let us know what you think in the comments. If there are other movies or moments that you would like to include in a top 5 list, or if there's ones that you think, that really didn't surprise me, but this one was way better. Or if we talked about a movie and you guys went and watched it, or a TV show and you guys went and watched it and you guys decided you liked it, I really would like to hear those comments. So please let us know. My comments have not been turned off on YouTube, so I am in a very prestigious position right now. So please comment on all my videos, unless it's something nasty like the person who commented very rudely on my last sweater that I wore, and I will not reveal that person's name, but I was very offended, and I would like everyone to know. So, Jacob, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope to have you on again in the future. You guys can follow Jacob at RealJacobAirey on Twitter and at Studio Jake on YouTube. So
and my blog, jacobairey.blog.
And his blog, yes. Follow Jacob's blog as well. In fact, that's the most important one, quite frankly. All right. Well, I will talk to you guys on the next episode.